At 93.3 WMMR, it is our great pleasure to be backstage with Michael Trent Reznor Jr. Welcome back to Philadelphia, Trent.
Glad to be here.
Good to have you. Nine Inch Nails in town tonight. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you were born and raised in Mercer, PA. I guess not too far from here in Western PA. Will there be any family members in town tonight here at the show?
No, it's quite a haul. I'm way on the other side of the state, so they usually go to Pittsburgh or Cleveland, where I just saw them. So.
Your father still resides in Pennsylvania, though, doesn't he?
Yeah, everybody, pretty much the rest of my family is still in the same kind of area, so they're all still there.
Very cool. I understand you started playing piano about 5, and sax and tuba came along in high school. What first drew you to a piano?
The insistence of my grandmother, and that was purely it. Yeah. And then it came naturally to me, and I started to enjoy doing it, and I kind of identified myself through that. Yeah.
Now, Chris, you had a question about Trent's high school days, I believe?
Yeah, I grew up in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and growing up in an area where there's nothing to do when you're in high school, I just had a stupid question: did you guys have field parties? Did you guys go to field parties if there was nothing? If no one's parents were away for the weekend, what kind of stuff did you do?
Basically, that kind of thing, was trying to find something to do. Because when I grew up, the closest city was Pittsburgh, and that was with no car. Even with a car, that was still, an hour away. And I don't think I maybe went to Pittsburgh 4 or 5 times somehow. But you just, whether from tipping cows to, general mischief, just anything to kind of keep things exciting,
Now, after high school, you went to Allegheny College for a year or so. Then you left and decided to move to Cleveland, which, as you say, is closer to where you grew up. What did you expect to find in the big city of Cleveland?
Well, I was, I had the support of my grandparents, who I was being raised by, I went to college kind of because that's what you're supposed to do, and no one in my family ever went to college, and I had the ability to do that. And I realized when I was there that I could do what I'm doing there. I could do calculus, which is basically what I was going to school for, but I don't really like doing it. I really want to play music, and I wasn't sure how to do that, and again, being out in the middle of nowhere, kind of away from, there's people on TV and then there's you. And how you get to the other side of that television screen isn't very apparent. And I don't think it was based purely on talent. It had to be some agenda. How do you get that? There's no school to go to be what I wanted to do. So I ended up floundering around for a few years, and I was playing in a bunch of different little bands and cover bands and things, and it all kind of circled around the Cleveland area. And eventually I got a job at a music shop selling drum machines and stuff, and that got me there and got me in some other bands, and finally got me into a recording studio where I was cleaning toilets.
Yeah, you were a janitor at a place called Right Track Studio, and the owner of the studio, a guy named Bart Coster, I believe, said he was amazed at the intensity of your work, and he said, quote, Trent was so focused on everything that he did work so greatly. When that guy waxed the floor, it looked absolutely great.
Yeah, if you're going to do something, I could get every speck of pee off a toilet seat.
It's very hard to imagine Trent Reznor, though, as a janitor.
No,
we all have to start somewhere.
You got to do what you got to do.
You got to do what you got to do. In '83, you were in a band called the Exotic Birds, and it had sort of one of those earlier '80s, hard to describe, but more of a synth pop rock kind of a sound. I guess some people might have called it lighter, but by '89, when Pretty Hate Machine came out, your sound in those years intervening had really darkened, gotten harder, gotten angrier. Were there events that specifically caused the change in the evolution of that sound?
Well, my Nine Inch Nails is the only band where I've written anything for. So with the other band, like Exotic Birds, I was basically just a keyboard player, and they were friends of mine, and I worked with them at that music shop I told you about. And so I wasn't integral. That wasn't my band. It wasn't my sound, And I liked that stuff at the time, And when I finally got around to writing my own material, I had matured a bit and realized that what I had to say was a little bit maybe uglier, a little more violent, maybe. It came from a different place than the band you just mentioned. It had some kind of uglier sonic elements into it.
Now, you also had a question regarding Trent's evolution in terms of state of mind, I guess.
Yes, the first song I heard was Head Like a Hole when I was a freshman in college, and I was like, who is that? And as I being an angry person myself, I kind of felt like I've related to your music for the last 18 years now. I've been a fan listening to your stuff. And I always thought to myself, if I had the chance to meet you and ask you, is why? What, like I know where it comes from within me, and what is it that drives you? What is it that makes you angry? Like, especially like something I can never have, like songs like that. Like, was there a specific incident, or is it just a lifetime of pent up angst?
You know, I don't have the specific answer as to why I'm what I am or what drives me necessarily, but I think part of it is, and now that I've got friends that grew up in big cities and stuff, you know, I couldn't wait to get out of Pennsylvania. Nothing against Pennsylvania, but I felt like there was a world out there that you weren't allowed to get to because you were stuck in this cornfield with nothing to do. And a lot of that became a driving force to get out somehow, not be the guy working down the street at the gas station, you know, like I could see my destiny, you know. But when it came time to actually work on material and come up with ideas, and you know, when I realized I wasn't happy being the sideman in other people's bands, when it came time to find my own voice as a writer as to what I wanted to write about, you know, it started with a couple half-ass attempts at sounding like The Clash or writing political lyrics that I didn't believe in because the bands I liked believed in those things. I liked what Gang of Four was talking about, but I don't have any personal experience in that, so it sounded like I was a tourist. You know, I was just faking stuff on the first few kind of things I did. And then I found that I had been writing in a journal the whole time, stuff that was kind of lyrics, but I couldn't ever show them to anybody because they were naked. You know, that was like, I was going to go crazier. I had to write this stuff down. And when I finally got around to turning them into songs, that's what the first album came from. And I think that's when I learned that, well, you can resonate with other people if what you're saying has truth to it. And I knew I meant what I said, and I was trying to do it in a way that had integrity. And it felt daring, and it was terrifying to let other people hear that because there was no character being created. It was just me, you know. Yeah, and it felt like I'm not sure I want to show people, you know, that side, because it wasn't things I was proud of, you know, but it was things that really felt like it was driving me, and I had to get out somehow. And I think that's what really gave Nine Inch Nails its kind of impetus and made it communicate with other people, because it wasn't a postured fake thing. It wasn't calculated. Nor did I ever think it would really successfully take off in a commercial sense. And I'm not saying that from a humble point of view. It's more like it wasn't designed as a vehicle to get rich and famous. You know, it was just a way to, I have to get this out somehow. And here's a cool way to do it. And I found some people that'll give me a little bit of money to put it out. We'll see what happens. We chose not to go with a big label to begin with. Not that there were big labels asking, but we didn't ask them because I didn't feel that I was ready to be thrown into the meat grinder, and I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew it was this thing I wanted to keep pure at first. You know, so we signed with a terrible label, and I got my indoctrination into the world of record labels and that whole business side of things. But that's, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of...
I want to jump ahead to now because with the new record, The Slip, you've said it's more of a sketch than a painting. How would you expand on that thought?
Well, for a while, I can look back now clearly and see that I was very much governed by fear. I was afraid to do the first record because I didn't know how to make a record, and then the record came out and it did well, and we toured and that did well. Now it's time to make another record. And now you're going into it with a whole set of other things to be concerned about. Like, my life has changed because people like this last record I did. I now have a job doing this. I don't have to scrub toilets. It's fun to be on tour. It's fun to resonate with people. I wonder if they're going to like this new stuff I'm working on. And should I cater to them or should I stay true to myself? And, you know, you struggle with those things because I can pay the rent now because people like this thing I used to do. Should I do more of that? Should I push myself? Should I, whatever. And I think I've made the right choices throughout those times, but it became a good way for me to stretch that process out into taking an enormous amount of time between records. And every record had to be the greatest, biggest, most important statement of my life. And every sound and every song and every word and every hi-hat had to be epic, you know. And that's a recipe to just stretch it out into years between records. And I realized that a lot of it was unnecessary because it was me just being afraid to get in there and do the work. I was afraid to write because I was afraid I wasn't good enough, or I was afraid I didn't have it. That was lucky.